Hello everybody, ciao a tutti and welcome to Art with Ms.B. Today I'm going to teach you how to draw a landscape following the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds is a rule that is commonly used for composition rules in art, painting and drawing, but also in photography and in design. It is a rule that, if followed, allowed us to create a very balanced and harmonic composition, filling properly the space that usually in a landscape is divided in the foreground, the middle ground, and the background. And then with these imaginary lines that we trace across the page, we can place the element and the details of a landscape to make sure that is pleasant to the eyes. I'm going to use a soft pencil. If you have a B or 2B pencil is better because we're going to do some shading, so adding value, dark and light, shadow and light. I'm going to draw the whole thing with pencil, of course. I'm going to use actually a watercolor paper, but you can use a drawing paper or any paper that you have available. I'm going to do so because at the very end, I would like to brush some watercolor on top just to add a little bit of colors. If you prefer to color with coloring pencil, which I truly love, you can do so. You will just take more time. And this is why, like, in order to make a video that is not too long, I'm gonna do it in black and white and then just add a little bit of watercolor at the end. The focus, however, for this practice and this exercise is not on the coloring technique or particular color palette, but is indeed on the composition, which means what do we put, like what do we design and where in our space. And then, of course, the element of value, which makes everything more realistic and three-dimensional, and most of all, more dynamic. So for this practice, as I say, you need your drawing journal or a watercolor paper, a pencil, soft is better, an eraser, and then some watercolors, any brand, or you can color it with coloring pencil. If you use coloring pencil, remember that it will take you longer, and kind of refer to the technique that you will see me using to add in value into the picture. I'm gonna switch the camera so you can see my hand and we can start. Okay, guys, this is my paper, and let's pretend that the rule of thirds say that we kind of divide our paper into sections. So if we have two vertical lines and then two horizontal lines that intersect on our paper, and they're super light that you can barely see. Usually we don't even draw them. So you kind of imagine this, pretend that there is a tic-tac-toe, right? Graph. So in these points, in these four, like when the lines intersect, they are like a focal point, which means that if we put the element of a landscape on these points, we create a beautiful balance and harmonic composition, and the eyes of the viewer, which is the person who look at the drawing, will go from side to side, up and down. This is our foreground because it's close to us, so whatever goes here is going to be proportionally way bigger than whatever is in the middle ground and whatever is in the background. However, the foreground could be also here, and I'm going to show you how. So I want to immediately place an element that intersect this point of our rule of third of our graph, and I'm going to use a very squiggly line. You can follow along. I'm going to do a branch, very big branch. It's big because we pretend that we are looking at a landscape, at a countryside landscape behind a tree. So this tree is so big and huge that is the biggest things that we see on our paper. So I'm going to make sure that one branch can go exactly or almost exactly in the intersection. I'm going to go down for one more, and then I will go outside of the paper. Okay, now I'm going to add some leaves, and the leaves will be big because it's very close. So it's like we can go into detail, and you can do as many as you would like. The secret, of course, when we draw, and I always tell my students, is to really do not force or push the pencil on the paper. Go as delicate and as gentle as we can go, not only because in case we need to erase, we are able to erase without leaving any marks, but also because sometimes without even erasing, we can kind of readdress and recorrect the line if we need, if we want to do so. And now don't worry about this super light line behind, because as we add the coloring, the value, and that it will disappear into the drawing. But of course, if you trace those very heavy, I suggest you to erase them and make them very, very light, that you can barely see them. Now, we are going to place an element over here that which will be part of our foreground. So I'm gonna add with the same natural irregular line, I'm going to come up a little bit over here and back down. Now here I will place my tree in the intersection between these other two lines. This tree, it's pretty close to us, not as close as this one, so not as huge as this one, but pretty close. You can add some branches. Remember, like the emphasis, which is the focus of this practice, is on placing the element in a landscape. It's not like on the perfection of our line, the perfection of our drawing. Absolutely. Everybody can do this practice and you will do great. Focus on the process and in understanding what I'm talking about. Do not focus on the result that will arrive anyway, will come. So now with a very like a scribbly line, I'm kind of doing the texture for my trees. Pretend that you're doing a cloud, that you're scribbly, and we don't want the tree to be too perfect, right? So we want that texture to be consistent, but then you do a variation of somehow. Then we can add some nice texture on the trunk of the tree, around the brushes. Remember that mainly you can even just leave these black and white. So I'm gonna add a lot of texture and a lot of value just with a pencil. Probably I want to make the roots of the tree look a little more natural. I'm gonna expand them over here. I'm gonna probably add a little branch over here just to create variation, because you know these are natural things. I'm gonna go here on my first branch and I'm gonna do the same coloring, but just leaving some gaps. This one we're gonna make it nice and intensively dark, because also with colors and with value we can amplify this idea of three-dimensionality. So whatever is like closer to us, it tend to be bigger, so bigger designed, more colorful or more intense. So it tend to have more saturation. So you can have fun like I am right now, just by doing this type of line, adding this nice texture and at the same time coloring and kind of making the edges of the pencil a little more natural, so we don't see that neat line, right? The edge of our branch really becomes more organic, like it would be in nature. Same again, a little bit more over here. And because we decided maybe one side is going to be slightly darker than the other, because the light will come maybe from this side. So this side of the tree, I'm making it a little darker. The same is like inside the tree. You can start with a scribbly line. You can start to add some texture. The tree probably will be darker on this side and darker on the bottom and lighter on the top. So we are going to keep scribbling, coloring a little bit. If you have a soft pencil, you can also use the pinky to blend it, you know, a little, but then be prepared because your hands will be very messy. Nothing that is not washable, of course. They are like tools that you can use to shade. You can cover your finger in tissue. I'll do it very dark in here, very dark in here. You know, I'm shaking all of the table. And lighter, and a lighter color. So the way that I make it lighter is just by relieving the pressure. So here I add a little more pressure and a little more intensity and proximity of the line. Over here instead, I just do less, like a little less busy scribble, and also way less pressure. These exercises are awesome, and I do understand that if you are a very, very beginner, or like if you're very young students, it is difficult to kind of release and press more, but the more you practice, the better you will be. So don't get frustrated if that doesn't happen at the first time. What truly happened at the first time in life, right? The best things needs practice, dedication, effort. That's the beauty of it. And also remember, if the final result is not at what you expected, focus on the process, because it's the process that will truly impact you and your life experiences, because it's through the process that you learn new things. I'm gonna dark up the roots for sure. And here we have, I'm gonna start to add a little texture also over here for the, and if you think about it and if you notice, it's just an optical illusion. They are really, really scribbly lines, but they make such a huge difference, right? Otherwise it will be so flat and kind of boring, not interesting. It's not gonna give you as any emotion, any connection with the true landscape whatsoever. But sometimes it is not complicated. We think it is very complicated, but it's just a matter of scribbles and some lines as well. Mostly go on the first line so we can make it more organic, because we don't want to have these, super neat lines. We want to make it nice. Maybe here there could be a little bit of the shadow, cast your shadow, the shadow projected from this branch. We don't need to redesign a perfect shadow, but a perfect shape of this one. But, we create a beautiful, nice connection. Now, if you're using just a regular pencil, they usually are HB, probably you're gonna struggle a little bit to do the shadowing, like the value, because this one is a very soft graphite, and soft pencils such as B, 2B, 4B, 6B, etc. They're way better for shading because they're very soft, which means that as soon as we touch the paper, they will release the beautiful color and they tend to be darker. We need to make sure that we know how to relieve the pressure, otherwise it will be too much. Now I'm gonna do a little bit of shading on the leaves as well. So basically I'm gonna color some of the leaves. I'm not gonna color the whole thing. I wanna make sure that we have alternation of light and darkness. Definitely when the leaves touch each other, I'm gonna add some dark, or when they are close to the tree, the trunk itself, I'm gonna add some darkness, and then the rest is gonna be a little lighter. The one in the back definitely darker, because I covered by the one from the front. And probably this one underneath would be slightly darker than the one on top, right? So you're gonna make it nice and dark. Very dark, this one too. And here we start to dark up this side and light up the other side. I'm gonna dark the line in the middle of the leaves so we don't lose that nice separation. And as you notice, even here, they are just like different strokes with a pencil in different directions. These two leaves are gonna be the lightest one, mostly on the top, right? Because we have the light coming from this side. At least this was what I decided. And with the coloring also, we make all the edges look more natural. Nice. Now I'm going to add something over here because we want to fill this intersection to create a beautiful alternation and a beautiful balance. So let's set a sort of a line of the horizon first. Let's pretend that this is the countryside and this is our horizon. And here we have field and crops. So the background is the sky. And then maybe over here, I'm going to put a tiny little house. Well, not super tiny, but it's gonna look small because it's pretty far. So it's gonna be way, way smaller than the tree, way, way smaller than this tree. And the house has some trees nearby. And of course, this tree, which are pretty, pretty far away, they will be way, way smaller than this and way less precise and way less detailed, right? I'm gonna do the windows, the house, so I'm gonna make them dark. Here we're gonna have the barn, some shading. This side is gonna be way darker, this side too, this roof darker, this side of the roof darker. Gonna do some shading also over here, sort of a projection of the shadow of the house. Sorry, I'm shaking a little bit the table. And then I'm going to do few trees in a sequence. Maybe one isolated over here, one over here. And as you can see, sizing is also very important because it really helps with this idea of three-dimensionality, right? So with my pencil, I'm gonna color the trunk of the tree and then diversify the type of the tree. And remember, we are proceeding just like this. We scribble. One side of the tree will be definitely darker. One side and the top will be lighter. It's a scribble and nothing more than a scribble. We're gonna go over this line to make it look more natural. We're gonna create some nice, beautiful cast shadow of the tree. And off you go. Now we can, if you can still see the lines of the rule of third, like that we did at the beginning, feel free to erase them as I'm doing it. If they're super, super light, you don't need to. Over here. And then we are going to do a little bit of texture over here too. This could be nice grass. Potentially, you can even put a river going here and then like the shore, but I wanted to make something that is not too complicated, so everybody, regardless the skill level and the experience, that you can follow along and you can understand. So look at this. Remember, 1, 2, 3, and 4. We intersect, 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 and intersect. Now the composition look balanced. You have element in the foreground, you have element in the middle ground, you have the beautiful background to embrace it all, and it looks nice and balanced. Now, as I told you at the beginning, I'm gonna do some gently brushed with the watercolor for just a touch of color, just to make it look finished and complete. You do not have to do the same. You can leave it as it is, or you can color with the coloring pencil. What I like about brushing with the watercolor is just that it gives up a little bit of color. It make my drawing look nice and complete without taking a long time. Remember, when we do the background, like when we do the sky goes everywhere, right? So it's not only around the elements, but also behind them. So let's make sure that we don't forget that. And also what I like about watercolor, that as soon as you touch them, they are like a little more like saturated, and then you can blend them with more water and they will be like less saturated, and this gives a beautiful, beautiful alternation of light and darkness and intensity in the painting, something that I truly, truly love. If you happen to go a little bit on top of the pencil, nothing happened because the pencil won't react with the water. So now we learn the rule of third, which is a composition rule, right? As I say, it's very used in drawing, painting, photography, and design. When we learn a rule, doesn't mean that we have to use it all the time. So it doesn't mean that when you draw landscape, you need to always use the rule of third. Sometimes, actually, because you know of the rule of third, you want to break this rule because maybe you want to create a specific effect in your drawing, in your artwork. So in that case, for example, in a case that you want to emphasize, which means that you want to really, really focus on one specific element of your landscape, which is, it could be a tree, it could be a flower, it could be a house, whatever, right? In that case, probably you don't want to use the rule of third, but you want to break it instead, because you want to have a central element maybe, and then a very, very little details around it. So the eyes of whoever is looking at your artwork, they're gonna go exactly where you want them, like boom, something immediate, right? Sometimes instead, if you want to have an element of focus on the side of your landscape, instead to use the rule of third, you can use a sort of a diagonal perspective. So you place your element going in a focal point towards a focal point, and that is also perfect and it's interesting. So in the future, I'm going to teach you some other of these composition rule. They are extremely useful, mostly when you are like learning how to draw, you're doing your first landscape, your first drawing, and maybe you don't know yet. So they really give you like a good starting point. Then, as always, I encourage you to personalize and focus on your personal connection and on your personal intention when doing art. What is the goal that you're going to reach, that you want to achieve? What is the feeling that you want to give other people looking at your art or yourself while you create the art? And when you will be more expert and you know all of these rules, you will be able to make um, choices, to make decisions. Sometimes this decision at one point they will be even spontaneous, right? It's your hand guiding you and you just follow along. It's your creativity. But it is important at the end, at the beginning, sorry, kind of practice and learn about these uh, common rule, foundational rules, we can call them in different, way. They help us to understand, also work with the elements of art, such as line, pattern, texture, and um, convey principle such as balance, harmony, right? So I'm going to just barely spread this green here and there. Of course, I started to use the more saturated at the bottom where I want it darker. Remember that the watercolor, once they blend in the paper, they will light up a little bit. So don't panic if you say, oh my, it's too dark. Absolutely. And then you can also dip the brush just in the water without taking more color and help yourself to spread out the rest. I'm gonna change a different green. I'm gonna make it like a bright. I'm gonna spread it here and there on those trees. I'm gonna bring it up again here. And then the dark one again, just very blended. Don't worry, that was a lot, but it will blend into the paper eventually. You can tap the brush onto recoup a part of it, and I'm gonna use it actually for my leaves. Nice. Also, I love the element of surprise that comes with the use of watercolor, because sometimes you never know what happened. You put a little too much water, a little too little. Like, it's something that is the element of surprise, right? That I truly love. I'm gonna take the other one, mix these two green to make a brighter one, and I'm just gently brushing. The beautiful thing is that we can still see the pencil underneath, and so the value, which is this alternation of light and shadow, has been actually supported by the watercolor and not erased or cancelled. But it's what makes that drawing truly, truly, truly beautiful. Over here, a few elements. Now I'm gonna grab some brown, gonna make it nice and watery because I don't want it too much. And then I'm going to super gently, when I say super gently, I mean that I'm not applying any pressure at all on the paper. If you are doing so, it means that your brush is a little too dry and you probably want to dip it again inside the water. A little color over here for our branch. To the house, maybe just a tip of red. And now you can choose any color that you want for the ground. Gonna do just slightly. I'm not gonna overdo it. Gonna kind of light up with this beautiful warm color to just bring some, because we have, a lot of cool colors such as the blue and the green, and we wanna light it up a little bit and make it nice and warm to create a beautiful visual contrast also between the colors in the picture. And you see just now that we are putting some color, it gets way more complete, I would say. Here I'm gonna use a nice bright green between a lime and green, so it's also kind of on the warm side, although green is a cold color, but this tint in particular, it's pretty, pretty warm. More, like I'm gonna back it up over here. And gently brush it over here too. And we are all done, and this is our beautiful landscape done with a soft pencil, watercolor for final details, and following the rule of third. I see you very soon with another beautiful practice. Ciao!